Hey everybody, welcome to the Artful Souls. I'm Kyle Buckland, and today we're going to be painting a little barn scene. So real quick, we'll go through my colors. This is Permanent Matter Deep, Cadmium Red Light, Cadmium Yellow Light, Phthalo Blue, Ultramarine Blue, Burnt Sienna, Yellow Ochre, and Ivory Black. And then we have Titanium White. And in my medium cup here I've got a mixture of 2/3 Galkyd painting medium and 1/3 Gamsol paint thinner. I'm going to be taking a little bit of this medium and just mixing it into my white paint. So if you've watched the videos before, you'll know that this is a step that I make sure that I don't skip. It makes my paint a little bit more fluid, and it gives it a nice glossy sheen to the paint when it dries, and it also speeds up the drying time a little bit. So lots of good reasons to whip up your white paint. Now you don't want it so much that the paint starts running down the palette. We just want to try to loosen up the paint a little bit and get it to be just a little bit more pliable, so you can kind of see the texture of it there. Now the first thing that I do when I go out to paint is I have to figure out what I'm going to paint, and I always tell my students, I say, make sure you have a story, make sure you know what you're painting, because if you don't know what you want to paint, chances are you're not going to come back with a good painting. Part of the trick to this is figuring out what story you want to tell. So very rarely will somebody go to write a book and not have any idea what they're writing about. So we have to know what we're painting about. So today my subject is fairly straightforward. It's this little red barn here, and I like the way that we have some lines that converge in on this little red door here. So you can see that we've got some lines in the upper left of the roof of the other barn that kind of point down towards the door of the barn. We've got these boats that kind of point in from this side, and then this gate that kind of points in here. So we've got a lot of converging lines, so we're using kind of a radiating line design stem here. So we want, the center of interest is pretty straightforward here. It's going to be the door to this barn, but we don't want it right in the center. So we got to think about, well, where do we want to put our center of interest when we start? And I'm going to start with just a kind of a basic line drawing. I'm just going to use some cadmium red light, some ultramarine blue, and get a nice dark purple here. And you can use different colors for this, as long as it's dark enough that it shows up on the white canvas. And I'm going to go straight into the white canvas. Now I'm using a linen oil primed panel here. You can use canvas, stretched canvas, or acrylic universal primed canvas, just whatever you prefer. You don't want to paint acrylics on top of an oil primed canvas. So we're using oil paints today, and we've got an oil primed canvas, so that'll work. I'm going to start off by placing the door to this barn. So I always say, try to envision what you want your painting to look like before you start. And I'm going to put this door right in here somewhere. I don't want to get it too big because I want the rest of the barn to show up in the painting some too. So I got to have kind of an idea of how big I need this door to be so that the other parts of the barn can still show up. So. And everything's real loose at this stage, so if we need to adjust something, we can adjust it. And we're going to pay attention to these lines here. So a lot of times I'll hold my brush up to the subject matter and then bring it down to the canvas and to get my angle. So I can do that down here too at the bottom. We see that the angle shifts and it actually comes out this way a little bit. So we don't need to know all kinds of mathematical equations to draw perspective. The most important thing is that you trust your eyeballs and that you learn to just look and don't overthink it. Just look up there and see which way the lines are going. Now, as I said before, I want to get in this kind of line here, over here, this other roof of this barn. It's sort of a dark line here. It points down in there, so we're getting this little triangle, this little light area over here. So that dark will help point our eye in the direction of this door. And then right here we'll get these boats coming in here. And we might need to move them in a little bit, and that's okay. I mean, you don't have to stick to exactly what's there. If you need to move some stuff around, by all means, that's why we're painters. We can move stuff around. The photographer has to work with what's there. but we get to play a little bit with the shapes, and we can move stuff around. So I'm going to move those boats in just a little bit. Got that little wheel under there, and that little wheel right there. Put it in right there. So just real basic line drawing at this point. I'm not trying to get all the details in. We'll save those for later. It's tempting to want to start drawing everything all at once, but we don't need to do that. We've got this little gate here, and this is going to be another line that sort of leads us in to the door. So I want to pay attention to it. It's just leaned up against the barn here. We're going to be coming and painting in over top of a lot of this stuff. So right now, like I said, we're just getting the gist of it down. So if you've watched the beginner videos on my channel, a lot of times I would start with a paper towel. But we're going to go right in with a brush this time, so I'm going to show you how to do it. But the process is still the same. We still want to look at the big dark shapes first. So I'm going to go right in with my cadmium red light and my ultramarine blue and a good bit of medium on my brush. So I'm dipping into my medium. And I've got a brush washer over here. This is full of Gamsol. So this is a metal brush washer. It's got Gamsol in it, and I can clean my brush as I go. Now over to the right, which is just a little off camera, I have a cup with my medium in it. So those are the two liquids I'm going to be dipping into. Now I want to very quickly and rapidly brush in my dark patterns here. So we've got this nice dark pattern up here with this roof of the barn. These can be a little warmer or a little cooler depending on how much ultramarine blue. And if it gets too purple, add a little burnt sienna in there. So the burnt sienna has a little bit of an orange tint to it, and that's going to dull down the purple a little bit. The trick here is to make sure you're putting these darks in the right place, but don't take too long to put them in. So you see I'm using a number 12 or number 10 bristle brush. So it's a big brush, it holds a lot of paint, and we can really quickly establish where these darks are. There's just a little hint of a dark under the door here. And just a suggestion, I'm going to go ahead and just pop in a little exaggerated darks right along there just to kind of delineate where the barn is and where the grass is. Now we've got some interesting things happening up here that I want to pay attention to. This dark actually comes down to the door a little bit, right? Comes back up a little bit over here. It's these little things that give this barn character, and I want to pay attention to those. And we also have some of these little lines. We'll go ahead and pop some of them in right next to the barn here, right next to the door. We've got a little dark right here, and we've got some darks over here. So I'm going to go ahead and mask them in as a big dark shape. See, we don't have to draw all that detail right now. We're just going after some big general shapes here. And, you know, I don't like this little light triangle up here at the top, which that'll actually become a darker gray. But I want to make sure I remember to come back up there and get that roof line in there. We also have some darks right underneath of this boat down here. So we've got this wheel, which is a dark. I'm just masking it in as a dark shape. Again, we want to stay away from trying to draw detail at this stage. It's so tempting, but it can really get you in trouble. I'll just kind of suggest maybe a little variation over here in this barn. Now, one thing we want to do is we want to look at value. So I'm always talking about how dark or how light is my object. So we've got a few different values here. We've got the red barn, and we've got the roof. So we've got this area, we've got this roof here. And if I squint down and I look at that, the roof is a little lighter than this red. Sometimes we get tricked by color because we see how bright the red is and we go, oh, that red is really bright. You know, but what we want to do is squint down until our eyes are almost closed and then compare, well, if this were a black and white photograph, how light or how dark would this area be? So we've got this area that's a little lighter than the red. And then we have the green of the grass. Now the grass is a flat lying plane, so it's going to pick up a lot of light because the light's coming down from the sky. So you could think about that as if you held a white piece of paper up on the, on the floor in your room, and your light was in your ceiling. The white piece of paper looked very bright. Now if you tilted that up, it wouldn't catch as much light. So the ground plane is usually a light plane. And right now it looks like the ground plane and this area here are almost the same value. So two different colors, but similar values. So let's go ahead and tackle that in. Let's go ahead and tackle that bit of painting there. Let's jump in and do this red first, because it's a nice vibrant part of the painting. But I don't want to get it too vibrant, so I'm mixing my two reds here, Cadmium Red Light and Madder Deep, and get a nice red in there. But I'm going to add just a touch of Ivory Black and Yellow Ochre. So the Ivory Black and Yellow Ochre are going to give me a nice dull green, and that's going to dull my red down just a little bit, because green is the complementary color to red. Now we'll lay this in and we'll test it out here and see how it looks. That's pretty close to what I want there. So I'm going to go ahead and very quickly, see the trick is to get this color down on your brush and then quickly put it in here where you want it. Now it gets a little darker, there's a shift. It looks like the barn was painted maybe at a different time or with a slightly different color red. So I want to go ahead and get all this lighter red in here where the door is first with this vibrant color. And we've got some area right here. But then it shifts, so I'm going to add just a little bit of my purple that I was originally using when I was first drawing in my darks. Just to shift that red just a little bit. That's a little bit too much. I want to bring it back. And we can go ahead and bring that down where this gate is too. So we can come back and paint that gate over top. I'm keeping my paint nice and thin right now. There'll be some time for some thicker paint later, but right now let's keep it nice and thin. I'm going to go ahead and use that same darker red over here. So again, we're making approximations. This doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be, it has to relate slightly to what's going on, but we don't have to get it perfect. We'll drive ourselves crazy if we try to get everything perfect right now. Let's sketch back in some of that door there. And there's a nice gray, like a weathered gray. So instead of gray, if I squint at it, it's got a kind of a greenish blue to it. So what I'm going to do is make this green with using my yellow ochre and my ivory black, a little bit of white. It's going to be a real grayish green. Nice little bit of this color on the brush. I'm going to come right back in over top of my red and just put it right in, right on top of the red. Just in a few spots, just to add some variation to this red. And then we can wash our brush out. Now, before we go too much further with that area, let's go ahead and tackle some of the other areas. So we're moving from area to area. Let's get this green. I'm going to use some cadmium yellow light and some ultramarine blue. Make a nice vibrant green. And then I'm going to let that green mix with a little bit of this red, and that'll dull it down a little bit. So I'm using colors that I've already got on my palette. And that's going to create some color harmony. We want this to be a little bit lighter. A little bit lighter than the red that we were using on the barn. It can be dark right in here, so I'll go ahead and put this in, and then I'm going to add some yellow ochre and some white to it. But we'll get this kind of a nice spring green in here. So the greens are starting to come back to the grass now here in Virginia. I'm going to use some yellow ochre and some white to lighten it. A little bit more yellow ochre. There is some of that straw color in it too, so as we come forward we'll get some more of that. I'm going to use, now see how my brush strokes are pointing in towards that door, so that's not by accident. I'm using the direction of the brush stroke to lead your eye into the picture. I want to go ahead and fill in this little white spot up here. The goal is going to be to cover the white of the canvas as quickly as possible, because that can get distracting for us. And now that I'm getting this laid in, I want to make these darks just a little darker. I want to come back and restate some of these darks. I'm using a burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, and cadmium red light. I'm going to go ahead and kind of hit these darks a little bit harder now. So we can always come back and adjust things. Like I said, if something's not dark enough, we can make it darker. Something needs to be lightened, we can lighten it. So don't feel like you have to nail everything right off the bat. And there's some burnt sienna up in this dark, and it's got these rafters of this other barn that kind of point down this way. So I'm going to use these brush strokes like this to suggest that. And then there's some brush strokes here, some other parts of the barn. I want to go ahead and fill in that corner, so let me use a little ultramarine blue and ivory black here. Make a nice purplish gray, kind of a cool tone here, just to get this little color up here in the corner, because it's distracting if it's that light color up there. Alright, now let's keep whittling away at these parts of the canvas here, these white parts. Let's tackle these boats. So the boat underneath is a warm gray color. So I've already got that color on my palette here. It's close to that green that we were using on the barn. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that color and just go ahead and mass in this shape here. Then it gets a little lighter on the left side of the boat, so I add a little white to it. So I'm drawing with value there. Then we've got sort of a faded red for the boat on top. So I've already got some reds mixed up. So I'm going to go back into that green, or that gray that I was just using for that boat on the bottom, but I added a little of my red to it. And this is not exactly the color of that boat, but it's going to work because it's the right value right now. So like I said, if you don't have the exact color, it's more important that you have the exact value. Now we can restate. And I've moved to a slightly smaller brush, so now I'm working with a number 6 flat bristle brush. I like these flat bristle brushes, Filbert brushes, flat brushes. I'll bring out a round brush every now and then, but generally the majority of the stuff that I do is done with flat brushes. I feel like I can do a lot with them. Now I come back and redraw this tire, and see, if I have enough paint on my brush, I can go right back over that green of the grass. So that's what's called a la Prima painting, where you paint wet into wet. So you're not waiting for layers to dry and then layering stuff up. You're just going right back into what you have there and painting right over top of the paint. So it takes a little practice, but with enough medium and enough paint on your brush, you can do this. Let's get this lighter tone right here, this tire, inside of the tire. I'm gonna make it a little darker than it really is, because I don't want bright white right out by the corner of my canvas. Now let's keep moving along, and let's get the roof. Now the roof's a little tricky because it's getting a glare off the sky. I'm gonna use burnt sienna and go back into this purple color that we have mixed up. I'm gonna add a little bit of ultramarine blue. Now too much blue is gonna make it too cool, so I don't want to do that. So I'm gonna add more burnt sienna and just a touch of that cadmium red light. And I want this to be very similar in value to the grass. So like I said, if I took a black and white photograph of this, you know, we want it to be the same gray as the grass. So this is probably close to what we want, and then we can run some cool colors over top of it. It's a little bit too warm, but that's okay, because I can come back with some cooler colors. Add a little bit of ultramarine blue to it. And see, I'm using the direction of the brush strokes here to emulate the way the metal's laid on the roof of the barn. And go ahead and fill up all these white spots. Don't, sometimes it's tempting just to paint to the edge, but paint up to and maybe even a little over the edge, and make sure you're covering up the white of that canvas. Now let me come back with a cooler purple. So we'll make this ultramarine blue and cadmium red light. The trick to this is make sure it's the same value, so as the warm color. Add just a little bit of that permanent matter deep there to get a nice purple. Then we're going to come back and just pop that in there. It's just a little light. Add a little bit more color to that. A little ultramarine blue, a little cadmium red light, a little bit of medium. I'll get that purple in there. So what we're end up with is two different temperatures. So I've got a warm temperature on the bottom, and then I'm putting this cooler temperature on top. Alright, so I've got a number 4 brush now, number 4 flat bristle brush, and I'm going to come back. Again, I've got some of this white canvas and still poking around in places, so let's go ahead and finish filling in all that. Mix up a burnt sienna, a little bit of white, a little yellow ochre, a little ivory black. Get this nice, the color of hay, because it's basically, there's dead grass in here too. I'm just going to come back and pop that in areas here. And we've got some light colors up here of the sky over on the left hand side, but I want to be careful. I don't want to make them too light. Again, I don't want anything super bright right by the corner of my canvas. So I'm going to use yellow ochre, and then you go back into this purple that I was using for the roof and make a sort of a creamy color that's just a little lighter than anything else here in the painting. That'll be that sort of that sky value right there. Then we can come back with some of these darker tones, ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, and redraw some of these beams where they come in front of this light area of the sky. I want to do this. You see how I'll hold the brush here, and I just want to put it right here and just let it drop. So that's a great way to make up a nice vertical line. I don't have to get in there with my wrist and try to draw a vertical line. I can just put it in and let it drop. I'll show you that again. We'll do it here right around the door. Let's really pick out where these lines are for the door. So got my nice dark. This is dark red for this. I put it here at the top of the line, and then I just let it fall. Got another one over here. Just let it drop. Okay, and you can do this. This is great for when you have a bunch of vertical lines. For example, some of these boards, watch this, we can go, let me get the right value there, nice dark. We can go, drop. Let's see how that works. And again, they don't have to be perfect. We're not architects here drawing a rendering for a new building. We're painters, so we can make things a little painterly. That's why I love painting old buildings. They have some play in their lines. They tell a story. We don't want them to be too perfect. Don't want to ruin that story. Let's get some lines here in the roof. And go ahead, once you start this, go ahead all the way across and get all these lines in there. You might forget, and then you come back and you go, oh, I forgot those roof lines in there. So go ahead and put them all in there, just like that. So now, we've got some areas over here where there's some greenish fence posts coming in. Go ahead and mix some dull greens here and sort of a grayish green. So the colors on the left side of the palette you can really mix some duller colors with. I always call those my earth tone primary. So burnt sienna is like a red, yellow ochre is like a yellow, and then ivory black is like a cool black. So I kind of think of that as a very dulled down blue. Make some dull colors over there. So go ahead and just darken in this corner. This is not really there, but this little dark shape will help bring out that boat. So sometimes I'll just do something like that. And see, we've got color dripping down here, but that's alright. We can come back in, sort of just brush that back out. So you can always come back in and fix little things. Let's create a little texture over here. A little bit of this where this grass comes up. See that? Just like that. There's some little spots where that darker green grass is in here, so we can use it. But let's not put them just anywhere. Don't be arbitrary with these brush strokes. Put them in places that are going to help lead the eye in towards the center of interest. Alright, so we've got all these radiating lines. We've got this line, we've got these lines from the boat, we've got these lines here of this darker grass pointing in towards this door. So everything's directing our eye into here. Even this line right here is. So I'm not neglecting that. Keeping that in my mind. We want the viewer's eye to go in towards that door. Pick out some of these areas over here and darken them up. It takes some patience to paint like this because your natural inclination is to jump in and finish everything right away. You have to be okay with your painting looking a little weird for a little while, but then what happens is if you're patient enough in the beginning stages, then when you get to the end, everything kind of pulls together. And adjust the color of that boat just a little bit. See, we're almost done laying in the painting. So, like I said, the first step is to get everything covered. Get all the way to the canvas covered. Then we can come back and have some fun playing up some different thicker paint and things like that. So I still want to go ahead and take care of some of this. This over here is too light. I need it to be darker. Now a lot of times after I lay in the whole painting and I get it to this stage, what I want to do is come back to the center of interest and start working there and then work my way out, because what you'll find is a lot of times you'll find that you can leave a lot of the edges rough. Before I do that though, let me go ahead and pop in this gate because we painted over it, but that's okay, we can pop it back in now. This is a nice rusty color. Make it a little lighter than it actually is, make it stand out from that barn just a little bit more. medium on your brush and enough paint, you should just be able to paint right over what you've already done. The trick is to make sure you're not trying to brush it and brush it and brush it. You get it on there and you decide where you want your brush stroke to go, and then you just put it on there. And again, I'm bringing some of these lighter colors out so that the skate stands out a little bit. That's all right. I might come back with just a few more darks, so burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, maybe a little cadmium red light in there. A nice dark purple. And I want to be a little more careful this time about where these go, because now we're starting to get into the stage of the painting where we're delineating some detail. We don't have to be perfect again, but we want to be a little bit more concise than we were in the beginning with these strokes. So I'm cutting back into things and shaping up some of these shapes here. There's some nice, and see, I'm using the edge of this, so this is like a number 4 brush, flat brush, and I can use the edge of it to get a nice line. So this is broken over here. It's like there's little laths over here, so the board is different. Now as these lines come down the canvas, they're going to start changing direction because of perspective. So as I get past my eye level, they're above my eye level, they're going like this. When I get past my eye level, they start actually pointing up a little bit to the left. So there's little subtle things like that that will make the difference with the drawing that you want to kind of make sure you're paying attention to. And if you have trouble with that, just get out with a piece of charcoal and some paper and just do some charcoal drawings. They're great for practicing perspective. You don't always have to bring paint out every time you get out. You can do some plein aire drawings. It's great practice. So we've got this little board up here. Now, I want to mix up a nice red with some really nice thick paint for this door, because this is where our eye is going. So let's give our eye something to look at. When the viewer's eye gets to this door, we don't want to have some half-ass painted area there. We want it to really, really show it. We want to show it off a little bit. Add a little bit of yellow to that, just to warm it up a little bit. So now we've got some nice thick paint on our brush, and we're going to just lay it in like this. I'm almost putting it down board for board at this point. And do the same over here. Now see, we've got some variations in the red. That's okay, it's going to make it colorful and interesting. That's the cool thing about working with lots of paint like this on your brushes. You never know what's going to come off the brush. And sometimes you might get a little something, and as long as it's in that range of color and value, you can go with it. So over here the red gets a little darker, so I'm going to add a little bit more of that darker red color to it. And push on the panel to get the paint to come off of the paintbrush, so we're pushing up against the panel and squeezing the paint out of the brush. So now we're using things a little bit more painterly. And we've got some of that greenish gray in there, so let's go ahead and mix some of it up. I'll use that yellow ochre and ivory black. Notice that this color looks different on the palette. It looks a lot more gray than it does when I put it up there. That's because all that red in the barn is going to make it look green. So we've got some spots along the bottom where water has been bouncing up and taking that paint off. And then there's some little spots in the middle. They've got a little bit more of a bluish tone in the middle. Just picking up on these little subtle differences. I'm going to use a tiny bit of that phthalo blue. Now be careful with phthalo blue. It's a very strong color, so a little bit of it goes a very long way. Get some of that. And now when you have this color on your brush, think to yourself, are there other places where I can use this? And there are. There are some other places where that gray comes through here. So we'll go ahead and put that in while we've got it. I'm going to add a little ultramarine blue and a little madder deep there, permanent madder deep, and kind of make more of a purplish gray for these tones over here. And I want to accentuate some of this light on the roof. So I'm going to make a slightly lighter purple tone. Lean it a little bit towards the blue side. Might be a little too dark still. I want this to be light enough where it really looks like that sky is reflecting off of this metal. Yeah, something like that. And then as it starts to run off on my brush a little bit, that's okay, because it's going to add a little variation. So it's a little bit brighter and more blue, kind of right in here by the center of interest. And the roof actually bends down. You can see that just a little bit. There's a little bend on it at the end, so the value is a little darker at the end of this area here. So we don't want to have that light carry all the way down. There's actually a little value difference right here where the roof bends over. Just pop that in little places here. Again, we're just adding more variation to things. Some of this dark is not as dark as I've got it in there, so I want to come back with some dark, but not real dark. Sort of a dark grayish green color. And where you see some of these boards, so this is coming up from here where this light is. As they get up towards the top, they're a little darker because there's a shadow hitting them. There are some places there where I kind of see just a hint of some of those boards still. Right there. Now, let's look at this for a second. There's a little interesting piece of drawing here where the roof comes down here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the roof in, and I'm actually going to come back with that dark and cut into it and shape it up. So there's little subtle drawings on the roof. So now I want this nice warm dark. So black, ivory black, cadmium red light, ultramarine blue. Give me a nice warm dark. And now every time there's a line on the roof, there's actually a little hump because of the way that the metal bends up. So I don't have to draw that with the light. I can draw it with the dark. So I'm cutting back in here. So we're shaping up the metal. I want to get a little more variation to this red line. It has some ups and downs here that are kind of neat. Bring the red up in here just a little bit. Bring out some of these lines in between the boards here. There's a line right along this boat that's nice right here. Nice light. Might be too light. I'll come back with some dark and darken it up just a little. Cut back into it. Now just like we did with the boards where we put some texture in right where our eye goes, let's do the same thing with the grass. So I'm going to start getting some thicker paint here. I'm using yellow ochre, cadmium yellow light, ultramarine blue. And I'm going to get some nice thick paint on my brush, and then right where this goes, I'm going to put this thicker paint in here, right where all these lines are pointing up towards this door. There's that green. Back through here, there's some of it. And there's actually, I don't want your eye to run off here to the end. So what I'm going to do, there's a little bit of a mower deck over there, and I'm just going to pick it up. We don't have to make it anything recognizable. It can just be a shape. So I'm going to go ahead and brush that in right now. It's sort of a dark, rusty brown shape there. And it's got some little variations in it, maybe some little lines there that suggest some machinery on it or something. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's basically a stop for your eye so your eye doesn't go off the corner there. Had a little detail there. There's some places where I can see some nice warm greens coming through here. There's some fields off in the distance. I'm going to go ahead and put them in. Nice light value though, a little bit lighter than that. So put that right in there. There's a bungee cord holding these boats on that won't hurt. Put that in. A line right there. Get some purple. Make a little bit of this sort of a hay color with a little purple in it. Some of this grass. It's a little lighter out here. Same color, different value. And just little bits and pieces of brush strokes down here are going to suggest sort of a roughness to this area. Now watch this. We want to make sure we grab a hold of some of this dark value under these boats, because that's going to help give them, put them in their place here. We don't want them to look like they're just floating. So there's actually a shadow that runs along here and comes out into there. So we want to make sure we pick up that shadow. And again, it doesn't really matter that the viewer knows what everything is. What matters is that our center of interest makes sense. So we want them to know that that's a red barn with a door right here. But this stuff, it could just be, bits and pieces of things, and if it suggests some boats, fine. If it just suggests something, some equipment, that's fine too. If I were painting a portrait of those boats, I'd pay more attention to them, but I'm not, so I'm not too worried about them. They're in our peripheral, and a lot of times we can leave stuff on the edge of the painting slightly unfinished, and that gives us more of a feeling of how we actually see, because we don't see a lot in detail. It always blows my students' minds when I'm teaching and I tell them, if you look at a spot on your wall, say there's a picture on your wall or a poster or something, and then you try to look at something next to that on the wall, you have to move your eyes. You can only see a very small area at one time, and we have to shift our eyes if we want to see any more. So sometimes, we don't want to paint everything in detail, because that really just simulates how a camera sees, but it doesn't really simulate how our eyes see. A light post right there. A light colored or valued post, not a light post. Now we can come back with some black and yellow ochre and pick out some darks in here. So when we want to mass in our dark areas first, we don't want to use pure darks. We don't want to use pure blacks and stuff, because we want to have room to come back and make areas darker and some areas lighter. Now we can switch. I want to switch to a smaller round brush and just get some of this detail right around the door. So again, I'm staying paid. You know, my attention is on this door. I'm working around it and doing little things around it, but I really want to make sure I get this door painted in there. So there's a nice neon green, sort of a yellowish color algae, or like a mold or something coming up the bottom here. A moss. That's the word I'm looking for. Not a mold, but some kind of moss. And that green looks really nice with that red. So we might play with it. We might make up a little bit more of it. I like that. So let's put some of it over here. Have it creeping up this. Now a little bit looks good. Now you could overdo stuff like that, so you want to be careful and not overdo it. So I'm going to leave that like that. Pick up on some of this area over here. So now we start kind of whittling away at some of these little detailed areas. Like I said, when we first start, we start big and bold and we're all over the place. And now the process slows down a little bit. We start going back into areas and seeing what they need. It might be a good time to take a little break and step away from your canvas for a second. You can squeeze out fresh paint if you need it. Obviously I need a few colors, so I'll get some paint and squeeze out some fresh paint there. Always make sure you're not skimping on your paint. The worst thing to have is, not enough paint out on your palette to make a painting. And I'm not going to go into specific brands of paint because there are so many out there, and there are some really good ones. I have my favorites. I will say buy the best paint that you can afford. To an extent, it's true what they say, you get what you pay for. Now, some of these really expensive paints, I just don't know, because I've never paid, $100 for a little tiny tube of paint. But generally speaking, you want to buy artist grade paints. If you do use student grade paints, be careful, because any paint that has the word hue after the name of the paint means it's not a real pigment. So if you have cadmium red hue, that is not going to act like real cadmium red. So if you are using, cheaper student grade paints, make sure they're at least real pigments. So there are some brands that have real cadmium reds, real cadmium yellows in their student grades. But another thing you might want to consider if you're using the cheaper paints is to varnish them with something like Gamvar, which has a UV protectant in it, and this will keep the colors from fading with exposure to UV light over the years. That's a good idea too, no matter what kind of paint you are using. I love Gamvar. I will say that it's a great varnish. It's made by Gamblin, the same company that makes the thinner and the medium that I use. I don't want to get too carried away over here on this side. Just want to finish this drawing over here, but it's, it'd be tempting to get too detailed over there. I don't want your eye going and staying over there. And there are some little handles on this door that I want to delineate a little bit. Just a little touch here and touch there. Little hinges at the top here, where it slides. Love these little dark areas. This little adds so much character to a barn. So here we've got a dark area that's a dark, but then it's got a darker dark right in it. So just come back that with that little darker bit right there. And there's a nice bluish purple gray that is over here again. It's comes up kind of this green. So I'll kind of mix it in with that green a little bit. It's where the paint's starting to wear off the red there. Nice coloration. Over here too. I kind of want to get a brush. Let me get a larger brush for that because I want it to be able to do it in one brush stroke. See? So I've got a brush that's close in size to the actual boards on the barn. And that got too light, so I'm going to darken that up a little bit. Go right back over top of it to darken it up. And bring it down through there. And I want to push this light on this grass. So I want to come back and get this yellow ochre and white and some nice thick paint here. And just hit a few little spots in here. Maybe add a little bit of green to it. You want a little bit of medium, but not so much that you flatten all the brush strokes out. You want a lot of this body in the paint to hold the brush strokes. And you know there are some little bricks laying around. Might look cool. Paint one of them in there and see how it looks. And we don't have to do too much with this. I'm just going to do a shadowed side. Let's do it where it makes sense. A shadowed side here, shadowed side here, and then a nice light color on the top. And so I can get this light in there and come back with the shadowed sides too. And shape them up. So let's come back in there. Shadowed side here, shadowed side here. So just a little bit of form there. Again, this brick is leading us in, leading our eye in. And I want to shape up the edge of it, but instead of trying to draw it with the brick, I'll come back with the green and shape up the edge of it. Adds just a little bit of form to something down there, so a little bit of definition. And there are a few more spots where we can do that over here. If we draw one carefully, we can get away with suggesting the others. Well, I won't have to be as careful with these ones. So that's a neat thing. You know, if you have a bunch of one thing, pick one, draw it carefully, and then just suggest the others. Very true with cows in a field. If you have a bunch of cows out in the field, you don't have to paint them all. You only have to paint one. And the rest can just be blobs and brush strokes. And what will happen is your eye will see the one, and it'll go, oh, that's a cow. And so then it'll interpret the others. And again, like I said, that's a lot more natural and a lot more, it relates more to how we actually see. Because when we look out at a field of cows, we have to shift our eye from cow to cow to see them all. So when we look out there and one catches our eye, then the other ones are going to be more abstract anyway. I'm going to break up the color in the roof just a little bit. So we don't actually have this color in the roof. But I want a little green up there too, just to tie it in with everything. So the trick to this is to make the green the right value. If it's too dark or too light, it won't make any sense up there. But we can throw some green into the roof as long as it's at similar value with the other colors that we have up there. So I'm just going to quickly pop that in some places. I might have gotten just a little out of control right there. Let me come back and kind of, yeah, there we go. So, take your time at this stage. When you first start, you can start fast and be vigorous. I actually recommend painting quickly and vigorously in the beginning. But slow down and be a little bit more deliberate when you get to this stage in your painting. There's a nice little bit of drawing up here that I don't want to neglect. On the roof up here, there's a board that faces us. It's a warmer color. I'm going to put that in. Now, my eye is a little distracted by this area right here. So what I want to try to do is come back and mass in some of these shapes and just darken them in a little bit in some spots. I don't need all this. It doesn't matter if this is actually what's there. Okay, it could be what's there. So we're changing things now for the sake of the picture. It's the biggest lesson when it comes to painting is you're not tied to the subject matter. We're using the subject matter, but we can play around with it. And these areas over here can be so suggestive because, again, we're not looking over there. We're looking at the door to the barn. So that feels a little better. Same thing with this area over here. There's still some white canvas showing through in places. I want to go ahead and knock that out. Coming down now, we're getting closer to where we're putting on little touches, and at this point your brush strokes, they carry more weight because they're on the surface of the painting. So when we first started, we were dealing with big bold shapes underneath, but now we're whittling away here and we're putting some shapes down that really carry some weight. So be careful about what you do at this point. And I want to give a little bit more form to this gate, so I'm going to come back with that number 2 round brush. It's a bristle brush too. I like the bristle brushes because they hold a lot of paint. And I want to pick out the shadowed sides of this gate, so to be careful about this, we want to make sure we're on the right side of the bar here. So this comes up like this, comes around here. Now, when we get to there, we got to skip that little bar because it comes up. So we'll skip that. We'll skip that. Come over there like that. And do it again down here. Skip that right there. Skip that right there. So let's give it a little bit of form to that gate. Do it again right here. And And on this side here, we've got this shadowed side is right here. And now I've got this little round brush. I can go ahead and draw in some of these dark lines again, right here on this door. Same way. Put it at the top, let it fall down. Put it at the top, let it fall straight down. A little bit of light right there. Now I need to pay attention to this roof right at the corner. It does something crazy, but I'm not going to paint that because that would just look too crazy. If something looks crazy in real life, it's going to look twice as crazy if you paint it. So try to make things look more normal if you have something that just looks out of place. There's a little piece of metal hanging down off the corner of that roof, but I don't want to do that. And if your crazy looking friend asks you to paint a portrait of him, you can tell him I said that. No, don't do that. Alright. Let's see, so we have to start making decisions now. You know, how far do we want to take this thing? We could sit here and pick away at it forever until we just worked all the originality right out of it. But let's not do that. Let's just be kind of selective here about what we're doing. Put a shadow under this bit of metal right here, or whatever it is. It's a board that's painted blue. And bring out some of these lines a little bit more. You notice I'm spending a little bit more time now between each brush stroke. That's how it should be. I said you start off fast, then you start slowing it down and getting a little bit more deliberate with everything at this point. And you know what? I don't see anything like this, but I want something. I want a line right here. So we can just make something up. Let's say that there's a board that's nailed to that wall for whatever reason. And it's gotten painted red, and it's a little lighter than the rest of the wall there. I want it pointing in this way, so I'm going to put this right here. Who knows what it is? Maybe somebody hung some tools on it at one point in time, right? Doesn't matter, because when people see your painting in the gallery, they're not going to see the photograph of the subject matter. So they're not going to go, well, that wasn't there. Every now and then, if you're painting somebody's barn or house, they'll say, I don't think that's there. And then you can talk to them about the philosophies of art and why we're not out here just copying what's out there. But other than that, nobody's going to know. I think that adds a nice character. It completes the composition a little bit, you know, and sometimes you do that and then you see something else. Like now I want to see a board right down here pointing in towards the door. And I could do that. So these are the kind of things, like, after you paint for a while, you'll start to be able to make stuff up and make it look realistic. So right here, I put a light tone. I'm going to come back with a darker tone right underneath of it. Just a little piece of lumber right there. And now, so I'm working my way around here. Now I want to see something be accentuated over here a little bit. So we're fine-tuning now. We're fine-tuning things. These are the little things that when you look at a painting and you go, wow, what is it about that? I can't figure it out. But that painting looks, nice. And it's because the artist has taken some time to really compose something. It's not just a snapshot of what was out there. It's a composition. So just like when you compose a piece of music, sure, you got to write some chords and the main parts of the music at first, but then as you go, you start changing little things here and there, little notes. You bring out something, you quiet down one part, or you bring out another part, or you make a little part longer or louder or something. So that's what we're doing now. We're at that stage where we're starting to really, we're leaving the subject matter in the dust, and we're just we're making it our own. And so I actually start looking at the subject matter less at this point. So when I first start painting, a lot of times I'm looking at the subject matter. Now I'm looking more at my painting. I'm stepping back and I'm saying, okay, what's my painting need? And that's where you get into making a work of art. And that's where we want to be, right? We want to be making works of art. When you first start painting, it's okay to just go out and try to copy stuff. That's how you learn. But then there comes a point where you start going, oh, well, this would look better if it looked like this, or if it went like this. If there was a little bit of light up here, you can add it. So it's more intuitive at this stage, right? So we're very practical in the beginning. We're thinking about perspective. We're thinking about lines. We're thinking about where things go in relation to everything else. We're very specific about which way things are going and the temperature of the colors and the value of the colors. But then at this point we say, oh, okay, I need a little touch here. I need a little spot here. I need this here. And we're just playing. Moving things around. So I appreciate you watching. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you hit subscribe down below and click the bell for notifications so you get updates on when new videos are coming. And if you want to support the channel, my Patreon page is down there. Now, I've got a new plan, so I'm sort of revitalizing this channel. And what I'm going to be doing is I'll be putting a lot of free instructional videos here on the channel. But if you want some behind the scenes stuff, some extra tips and extra content, some additional instructional videos, I'll be posting those to my Patreon feed. And for as little as $1 a month, you can have access to all that extra content. So, I'm trying to keep things affordable. And I want to make sure I still have a lot of free videos here on YouTube, but just for $1 a month, and I think mostly everybody can afford $1 a month, you can get access to about 50% more content. So check that out, and I'll be uploading new stuff to my Patreon feed on a regular basis as well. I appreciate all the likes and the comments and the shares and all the subscribers. The channel's growing by leaps and bounds. We're at about 7,000 subscribers, so that's awesome. It's great to know that everybody's out there pushing paint around. I've had so many people contact me and say, started watching your videos and it really started to make sense to me, and I'm out there painting more, and I think that is just wonderful. It just makes me so happy to know that I'm able to help you all have a process for analyzing what you're seeing and getting it down on canvas. So, so thank you for that. Thank you for watching. You know, feel free to share these videos with anybody you think might benefit from them. It's a joy when you start going out and creating like this, and you know, so you don't always bring home a painting that you're 100% happy with, but you're always going to learn something, and you're always going to feel accomplished because you overcame that resistance that you had. And so I always tell people, I said, look, there's going to be 100 reasons why you shouldn't go. You know, you're going to tell yourself, I can't go out to paint today, the light's not right, or my tube of you know, a specific color of violet didn't come in the mail, and so I just got to wait for this. But really, the thing you got to do is just force yourself to get out there and push some paint around, and it doesn't take long for you to really start to feel it and get excited about it. And I always say, even on days when I might not feel like painting, it's like 15 minutes after laying out the paint, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm in this now. I feel it, and it's working, and I'm having fun, and I'm pushing paint around. So get out there, have a good time. Getting really close to wrapping this one up. There's also a link on down below in the description to my website, Kyle Buckland Fine Art. You can check out all these paintings will be available for purchase on there, and all my social media links, so you can follow me on Facebook, follow me on Instagram, and keep up with what's going on. And my wife Jennifer is going to be doing some painting too, so I'll be getting her in on some of these videos too, so you can see she's been doing some beautiful work, and she's been bitten by the plein aire bug, and she's been going out and painting a little bit more, and we're going to start recording some of her work too, and putting her on here so you guys can see what she's doing. So I'm really proud of her. Like I said, at this stage, just step back, take a look at your painting, decide how it looks, you know, take a break, go drink a cup of coffee, you know, come back to it. A lot of times, you know, I'll tell everybody, I get my paintings about 95% done out in the field. And then what I'll do is I'll bring them back to the studio and I'll let them sit. Sometimes overnight, sometimes for a couple hours. And I'll come back and look at them with fresh eyes, and then a lot of times I'll catch something that I didn't see before, and I'll go, oh, I need to fix this line. And usually it's just a few little things. Sometimes it's nothing at all. Sometimes I come back to them and they look better than I thought I left them. So I think just getting away and having that little bit of a fresh eye can really help. You can, you know, bring out some things that you might not have seen before, or sometimes we get a little bit of tunnel vision when we're working and we can't see things. So just taking that little bit of break and getting away from your work can make a tremendous difference. If you do want to, you know, when you get to your paintings where you're happy with it and you want to sign it, try to decide which side the signature would look best on. So, you know, and it's not always going to be obvious. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes an area, you know, like this, the signature could get bunched up. There's a nice little spot right here for a signature. So I think when I sign this one, I'll probably sign it right down here. And I'll probably sign it in a red, something that's sort of around this color. So I try to pick a color that's in my painting, and then that way it'll make sense with what's going on as far as the color scheme. And you don't want it too big because it'll be obnoxious and it'll overshadow the painting. So be careful about making it too big. But you also don't want it too small because you know, my philosophy is your signature is your calling card. You know, you're not always going to be in front of your painting to talk to people, so people aren't always going to know who painted the painting, and there's not always going to be a label on the painting like when a painting is in a gallery. So I try to make my signature legible. You know, you want people to know who you are. So my signature is very plain. I write in capital letters, and I just write K Buckland. And I try to make it so that people can read it and see what it says. That way, you know, when somebody says, oh, who did that? You know, they can look right at the signature. In this day and age, they can get on the internet and just Google Buckland art, and you'll get access to all my artwork. So, you know, if you have a fancy signature that you like, that's fine. But if you haven't decided exactly how to do your signature, be careful about signatures that are so fancy that you can't tell what they say, because, like I said, it's a good marketing idea to have your signature so that people can read it. And I think I'm going to stop right there for right now. I might pick away just a little bit at it later in the studio, but not very much. And then you'll see this painting on my website at kylebuckland.com. So don't forget to get on there and check it out. And get out there, have fun, push paint around. If you have questions, you can leave them in the comments below and I'll try to get to them. Thank you so much for watching this video and for checking out my art. Get out there, have a good time, and I'll see you soon at the next demo.